My name is Don Harris. I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. Today's date is April the 24th of 2007, and I'm interviewing former Circuit Court Judge Henry Denmark Bell. This interview is being conducted as a part of the Legal History Project of the Fellows of the Tennessee Bar Foundation. Judge Bell, good afternoon. I want to first thank you for allowing me to interview you this afternoon and for your agreeing to submit yourself to the interview. Let's start by you're giving us your full name and your date of birth.
Henry Denmark Bell, date of birth August 21st, 25.
Okay, that would make you about 81 years old as we sit here today, I think.
I appreciate the compliment.
Tell us how you got the name Henry Denmark Bell.
It was negotiated after some difficulty between my parents. I was born, as cited, in Knoxville, Tennessee, where my parents were living until they could get away from Knoxville and move back to God's country in Middle Tennessee, which was God's country for my father and adopted God's country for my mother, who was raised in South Georgia. And you want to know how I got my name?
Where the name comes from?
Well, the Henry comes from my Robertson County, Tennessee ancestors. This particular Henry, I think they had in mind my great-grandfather, who was my father's grandfather. And he was descended from the Hugh Henry who made the float trip along with four of his sons down the several rivers to get to Tennessee to found Nashville. But the Henrys got off at the Red River and settled in Robertson County. And that's where the Henry comes from. Denmark is my grandfather's name was Elisha Peck Smith Denmark, and my mother started arguing for that as my name, but she lost. She got the Denmark in, but nothing else. Then the Bell comes from the Bell family in Robertson County, who are famous for the infamous rumors having to do with the so-called Bell Witch.
I was going to ask you about that in a minute.
I've told you all I know.
Well, there's something you haven't told us. I believe your father made it as a condition of naming you that, what he would call you.
No, that wasn't a condition. After they decided on Henry Denmark, he says, I don't know what you're going to call him, but I'm going to call him Denny.
And how long were you known as Denny?
Until I got through high school.
Okay. You've mentioned that your grandparents that were from Robertson County, what were their names?
My grandparents from Robertson County.
Joel Henry Bell and Addie Bell?
Yeah, that's true.
And Miss Addie Bell had a distinction of her own. What was that? Oh,
she was one of the first female postmistresses. And that was sort of a political upheaval in Springfield, which is Robertson County. Her husband died when my father was a student at Vanderbilt, and he dropped out of school, went home. He had younger sisters in the family, and she needed work, and so she got it was worked out that one of our cousins who was postmaster resigned, and that opened it up, and then there was sort of a contest between my grandmother and another person as to who would be appointed postmaster, and that I have newspaper clippings. Everyone was excited about this, and she prevailed. And when I only knew her as the best cookie maker in the world, she was running the post office up the street.
Okay. You mentioned your father. He attended Vanderbilt, I believe.
He attended Vanderbilt, and he was a good athlete, and played under Ray Morrison, and
Played what sport?
Football, and he was on the team that was captained by Ray Morrison when they tied Yale. And the blight on my father's life was he had busted a math quiz and didn't get to make the trip. He was one of 3 substitutes that they took on that trip, and they had to take just 2. But
okay, now you've already indicated that your grandfather died when your father was at Vanderbilt, I believe, and he left. And where did he go from Vanderbilt?
he went to Springfield, where he was born and raised, and worked in his uncle's general store, and he was doing that when he got married, and had 2 children who were alive and walking around when the Depression came on, and which came to Tennessee early, and he found a job. They couldn't have him, 2 members of the family working in the store, so he got a job with International Harvester Company, and they sent him to Knoxville, and that's where I was born.
Okay. And I believe your father's name was Charles Caldwell Bell?
Yes.
And your mother?
Mary Lane Bell.
Okay, and we'll come back to this in a minute, but Lane was in her family ancestry, right?
Yes.
Okay. You say they moved to...
You're going to ask me about Mills Lane?
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. I sure am.
All right.
You say your father moved to Knoxville after having run the hardware store in Springfield. What did he do in Knoxville?
He sold farm equipment on the road for a traveling salesman for that company.
For International Harvester?
International Harvester.
Okay. And then how long did he do that?
I don't know how long he did, but he learned a lot of good East Tennessee anecdotes out of it, and he then got a job in Knoxville with the Hermitage Portland Cement Company, and he was a cement salesman, called on hardware stores and contractors,
and I believe
road builders.
I believe that it was in Knoxville that you were born.
Yes.
How long did you live there with your parents?
Through the 6th grade.
Okay, we'll get back to that in a minute. But then you and your family returned to Nashville, did you say?
Yes.
Where in Nashville did you live?
Estes Avenue, which is where it is. It's a pretty well-known street.
Okay. And did you live there the entire time that you were growing up in Nashville after you moved back?
We lived there through high school for me.
Okay. And I'm going to get back to your education in a minute, but then later I want to talk about the rest of your family now. You married Allen Wigginton, who later became Allen Wigginton Bell. When did you marry her?
Have I written that down somewhere?
I think it was 1952.
It was 1952.
Does that sound good?
And she has not been with us for quite a while, and so I've quit remembering the date.
I believe she passed away in December of 1997.
That's true.
That's right. Well, tell us something about your wife.
Well, she was a very interesting person. At lunch, I was telling you things you don't know. But she... when she was in grammar school, I guess, she got interested in acting, and she was on a radio program for children called Radio Patrol, and she was the girl, and there were two boys, one of whom was, do you remember his name? I told you. Well, he graduated in my class from the Vanderbilt Law School. He was a Nashvilleian, and his name was Harold Abelies. And I think I did tell you that when the dean of the school at the time, and you know his name because I told you, was out looking for people to contribute money for the good of the school, he looked up Harold Abelies and found him in his Beverly Hills office with his Bentley parked below stairs. And he said we had a nice chat, but I didn't come away with any money or any promise. And I think Harold has departed life since then.
During your marriage, what sorts of things did Miss Bell do?
Well, we were in school together, actually, before we married, and that's when she started making good money as the villainess on a soap opera that was being canned in Nashville, and the male parties were the local radio announcers, and I've forgotten their names, but the good ones, and that paid real money. So I wasn't marrying a pauper when I did.
Well, let's talk about that. You certainly weren't married a pauper because Miss Bell's father, his name was
Madison Smart Wigington.
Okay, he was a successful businessman in the Nashville area, I believe.
Yes.
What kind of things did he do?
Well, he joined the General Shoe Corporation when it started expanding, making boots for soldiers in World War II. He had been working for his uncle, Fletcher Wilson, that made coffee and peanut butter, or sold it. But he was with Genesco during its growth period, and he was very prosperous, but there came a time when the policy there at Genesco, made by its owner, one of the two owners, Jarman, was that everybody, me, Jarman included, retire when we're 60. And it turned out that the group that had come on during World War II had all started not dying at the same time, but all turning 60 at the same time. And the fellow that was there, whose name I've now forgotten, to replace Maxie Jarman and all these other people, as it turned out, he died. And so it was a ship without a rudder and just went broke. And it was huge.
And then I believe you're...
So my father-in-law died. He didn't die poor. because in his retirement, to have something to do, he was running the bank that was created after the first American had bought out and owned the Nashville Trust and exterminated it. And the Nashville Trust Company was a bank, though it's hard to tell it. But he then got the federal court, after 5 years of litigation or so, put out in his decree that the Genesco, that the Third National Bank, as best it could, should create a bank to replace the whole Nashville Trust, and they created the, what is the name of the bank? It's
Nashville City Bank?
Nashville City Bank, and I don't know why the judge let him get away with it, but it was wise, because Mr. Wigington, my father-in-law, was straight. and I think was a good chairman of the board, found him a good president, and started competing good with the Friendly Third. But his wealth was in Genesco stock, and it was worth nothing.
Okay. I think you and Miss Bell had a son.
We did.
When was he born? 1957, I'll tell you.
You've got my note. Okay. 1957.
His name?
Madison Smart Bell.
Okay, and Madison Smart is famous in his own right, is he not?
Well, he's famous with me, and he's well known, surely, in what he does. He writes novels and and other things he writes. His major work is a 3-volume, as close as you can get to a biography of Toussaint Louverture. And I don't know if we need to go into
Well, just tell us generally who that was.
Well, he was Madison learned things about him that he didn't know until he'd written 3 volumes about him. He was a black man, and one of the things he didn't know that he was a slave owner while he was leading what was many black people with a few landowners who were reaping the harvest out of Haiti. And it was in the time of Napoleon, and the French were trying to get control of Haiti, the British were, and also the Spanish. And Toussaint Louverture leading sort of bushwhacker troops, but he trained them well, and they managed to basically win the revolution. Turned out that Toussaint himself died in a prison cell in the Alps under the supervision of Napoleon.
And I believe Madison has written a 3-book volume about him, and then he's condensed that into a 1-book.
It's a 3-volume book.
3-volume book. But he's condensed that into a 1-volume book.
Well, yes, and that's probably in the bookstore now, because it's fresh out.
And then he's written several other novels,
and
short stories.
That he went back and was persuaded to do by the publisher to pick up the stuff that he didn't know about him at the time he wrote the original books, like being a slave owner.
Okay. But he's had several novels published in that thing over the years.
About 8.
He also has a day job.
About 8 or 9. Okay. He and his wife is a published poet, and she, if you read the New Yorker, look for her, she writes under her original name. And on the way home, I can tell you what that is. But the two of them, the husband and wife,
Beth Spires?
Yes. Mm-hmm. They are professors at the girls' school, Hollins, in Baltimore. Okay. And their arrangement is, they both got tenure, which they had a little trouble with because of other professors. But the deal they struck was they both commit themselves as half-time, he doing the prose writing and she doing the poetry. And meanwhile, they get pay and a half for what one professor would get.
And his wife also has another line of books that she's been very successful with, I believe.
She's, I think, sold more of one of her children's, nursery-type children's books than all 3 of his volumes. So.
Now let's get back to him a minute, because I forgot to say so. He's now working on a new project, I believe. And that's interesting for Tennesseans.
Yes, he he's taken money, substantial money for it, so he's going to have to do it. He's working on a biography of Nathan Bedford Forrest, and it's far enough away from the time that could be very good. I said biography, and I hope that's what he's going to do, but it's going to be slightly fictional.
Historical fiction.
He's going to make up some stuff. I don't know. I'll have to read it before I know if I approve. But I do think that forest has been written up too soon up until now to have a unbiased view of it.
Okay, and I believe they have a child.
They have a child, and she's brilliant also.
And her name is Celia.
Celia.
And how old is she?
Celia Dovell. How old is she? She's in the 8th grade.
So she's about 13 years old, I think.
Yeah.
And does she know what she wants to be when she grows up, or has she said?
She's showing literary talents. I don't know if she's going to be a versifier or the other.
Okay, and one of the people that I want to talk about, some other people in your family, and we've already referred to a couple of them. First, there's a legend in Middle Tennessee that people refer to as the Bell Witch. Does your family have connections with that legend?
Well, yes, if there's anything to have a connection to.
Well, I said it's a legend. I didn't say it was a fact.
Well, it is, as I was telling you this on the way to this gathering, Goodspeed's Tennessee history, written and published in 1848, treats the Bell Witch legend as a legend. It came into print when the youngest, Joel Egbert Bell, who was the youngest in the bewitched John Bell's family, after everybody else was dead, he spilled the beans to a newspaper publisher in Clarksville, which is the next county over, and it got published, and there it is. And if you want to know about the Bell Witch, Google Bell Witch, and you can spend a week and not see anything but the same little dab of stuff that was in that book over and over.
Well, give us a short form of who the Bell Witch was supposed to have been.
Well, she was a cross between she was a poltergeist with a voice. She debated the preacher and she scolded the people in the household. She apparently favored several of the children in the household, but who she tormented was John Bell. And part of the story is that there was a mysterious bottle of poison by his bedside when he died.
But there's also a part of the story that has to do with Andrew Jackson, I believe.
Well, that's part of it. That tale is that Andrew Jackson, who was around the premises at that time, during that period, and he thought he'd go up and look into it, and when his carriage approached the Bell place, the wheels locked. And the witch's voice explained to him that you can't go in any further. So he turned around and went home. Okay. I think that's.
Let's move on to another one of your relatives that it's someone people may recognize. It's a professional boxing referee who's small and bald-headed and whose trademark is the phrase, "Let's get it on." His name is Mills Lane. How are you related to him?
He is my grandmother was a Lane. He's the son of a bank president, probably bank owner. But how he's kin to me is that my Lane Denmark grandmother that we've mentioned had two brothers who became bankers. One was Mills B., who was a Georgia and South Carolina banker, and the other one was Edward, who founded the Atlantic Bank in Jacksonville, Florida. And this is one of the descendants of Mills B. He's a brother of Mills B's descendant. And he was good at boxing.
became a referee.
He went off to Ivy League schools and all of that, but he boxed all the while, and he got good at it. And
Some people may not know, but he was also a lawyer and a judge, was he not?
yeah, and the gambling place.
Las Vegas?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely.
Now, of course, I went to the University of Tennessee, so there's someone you're also, actually your wife was related to that I want to talk about, and that's John Smart, spelled with two T's. How are you related to John, or how was your wife related to John Smart?
Well, they are both descendants of Judge John Smart, who lived to be over 100 in good health and spirits. And he was a remarkable man, and he kept the family together. He just, and the family base was Warren County, which is McMinnville is the capital city. And they held that family reunion on the same Sunday, which always coincided with the hottest Sunday in August, I think. And much food and fanfare, and he wrote letters. He knew where everybody that was any kin lived, and they lived from Canada to Mexico and everywhere in between. And he'd start writing letters to these people, and sooner or later, a lot of them would just show up.
For those who don't know, John Smart headed up the University of Tennessee Alumni Association for many, many years. Are there any other relatives that you want to talk about here today?
Well, he's also a lawyer. I give him
well,
credit for that.
In fact, he
was the inventor of the show. Others here can help me with Payne, Donald Payne, and the other fellow John Smart was the one that made that educational program go. And after I went to the first one, I was afraid not to go.
I think that's referred to as the Tennessee Law Institute.
Yes, as I was saying. I went to the second one, I think, and I was practicing law and thought I knew a lot. I was afraid not to go after that because the legislature, it wasn't what the Supreme Court was doing, it was what the legislature was doing. When they do it, it's done. And I suddenly realized I need to know that sooner than I do. So.
Let's turn now to your education. I think you said you started school in Knoxville when you were living there.
I did.
What's the name of that school?
Sequoia.
And how long did you
That
go
was
there?
a sixth grade school, and I think I also told you I didn't learn a thing. Except long division, and my father taught that after hours. And I also told you I've been amazed of the people who, out of that class, who, I paid no attention to the girls back then, but we had two of them went through Annapolis, and the same two became lawyers. One of them, I think we all know. And then
Do you remember the name, or it escaped you?
Hmm?
Has the name escaped you, or do you remember who that was?
No, there were two of them. One of them practiced law as such, and the other's name was Charles Dean, and he was a head of the TVA, which apparently was one jump further than he could do with great success.
Okay, I want to go back. Yeah, about that time you moved back to Nashville. Where did you go to school in Nashville?
I went to the 7th and 8th grade to Woodmont School, and there the principal was Mrs. Mathis, and she taught me math. She taught everybody math. She was principal, but she taught math in both the 7th and 8th grade. And then later, she became principal of Julia Green School, which is still going as a school. I think she can't be living, but she liked me in particular because that class, which was a small school, there were 4 or 5 girls who went on to be Phi Beta Kappas and that kind of thing, but there wasn't even there was a couple, but she didn't have a real student, and she decided maybe she could make a real student out of me. So, among the boys, that is.
So after you finished the 8th grade, what school did you attend?
I went to Duncan College Preparatory School for Boys.
Where was that located?
I was on 25th Avenue, and our playing field was where the gymnasium for Vanderbilt now is. And it was one of 3 schools of its sort. One, Mr. Duncan was a product of Webb School, and I think Mr. Wallace, who ran a school, also was. And they believed in Latin and Greek, and they couldn't get anybody to take Greek. I took 4 years of Latin, and the last year it was a 2-man class. You had to take it 2 years. And the last year I would have been a 1-man class, except that Vance Berry came over when Mr. Wallace died, and he. They had a trapping system where someone's right and the next one below him is wrong. You get trapped. And if you get everything right, you get a head mark. And he trapped me every day, and that was embarrassing. But it turned out, I think, when they read out the grades at the end of the year, his score was 98 and mine was 96. So
close.
So that's that.
So what year did you graduate from Duncan?
It was in the middle of World War II, I know that. It was 1943.
Okay. That was like graduating from high school. I mean, that was...
Yeah, and plans had been made for me when I graduated. I had taken an exam that was given to see who might be good qualified people to get in the Navy V-12 program. And the concept was a good one, whoever thought it up. I think in 1943 we were losing World War II. And whoever it was that had the thought, I think, they did the right thing in putting some people in college so that you don't draft every male, able-bodied male who turns 18. And the idea was you could go in, and if you kept passing your subjects and did 16 months, then you went to midshipman school for 4 months, and then you got a commission in the Navy.
So it was actually the V-12 was a program that sent young people to college for further education before they went into the Navy. Yeah,
but they also had the plan that if you were making good grades and were studying pre-med or engineering, they'd keep you in until you graduated.
Where were you assigned in the V-12 program?
Tulane.
In New Orleans?
In New Orleans.
How long were you there?
16 months. And then I went to another hospitable place in World War II, which was Chicago, to the midshipman school, in a beautiful new dormitory that overlooked Lake Michigan.
And that was at a university there?
It was, I think, it was built for the medical school.
At Northwestern?
At Northwestern, which was not up the road with the rest of the school. It was right in Chicago.
So when you finished the midshipman school, what rank were you?
Ensign.
Ensign. And where were you assigned next?
To it had been a sub-chaser school, but they were calling what I went to advanced line officer training. Basically, it was for people who weren't quite old enough to be giving orders to anybody, to let you season out a little bit. And
where was that?
And have some training at sea. I was at Miami, which is another nice place to be. And that was about 3 months, I think. And then I got orders to do something, and it was to report to Gibbs Shipyard in Jacksonville, where I was to be executive officer on the ferry crew for a 100-foot harbor tugboat that was being built there. And it had virtually been built, and I got there, and after we already had our orders to sail, and we knew we were going through the Panama Canal and up to San Diego, but nothing else, the first atomic bomb dropped. And a few days later, the second one dropped. And I think we all just felt, well, the war's over, and didn't take things too seriously. But in a military organization, it takes time for everybody to catch up. So nobody told us not to go down through the canal and up to San Diego, so we did that. And we reported in there and thinking we'd be sent home, but they gave us orders to go up to the next port north and join a convoy, which we did, and were convoyed out to Pearl Harbor, where we were advised that your orders were to have taken it to Okinawa, but they don't need you out there, but we can use your boat here, but we can't use you. But they arranged for me to be captain of a 180-foot harbor water barge. And we were always happy to be seen, welcome when we pulled alongside the ships tied up out in the harbor, because we brought fresh water for making highballs and having showers.
And how long did you stay at Pearl Harbor?
I think the better part of a year, 10 months. And then I had enough points to get out if I wanted to, and so I got out, came home.
Have you continued to be interested in the sea or in ships and boats and that kind of thing?
Well, I like to walk in the surf.
Okay, after you got out, I believe it was about August of 1946.
Yes.
Okay, where did you go then?
I then enrolled in Vanderbilt, and it was interesting that I had enough GI Bill credit, because they credited the 16 months, 2 academic years at Tulane didn't count against my total time, so I could have gone through medical school. But I didn't want to be a doctor. But I did go through law school, 2 years of college and then law school.
Okay, and you earned a BA or BS degree from Vanderbilt, I believe? BA degree.
BA.
Now, did you do that? It used to be that you could go to undergraduate school for 3 years and then go directly into law school. Is that what you did, or did you finish your BA?
Well, I had 2 years from Tulane. I had 2 full academic years in the undergraduate school at Vanderbilt, but I was just 3 hours away from a major in mathematics, because they only had one other course, but I couldn't have passed that. I was lucky to pass the next step down. And the other, I guess, would have been either English or history. I could, within 3 hours, I probably could have and somebody down at Ireland's eating lunch or sipping beer told me that in your situation you can declare yourself in absentia and go on to law school and then graduate with your class. So that's what I did.
How did you become interested in going to law school?
I was brainwashed at an early age by my Denmark grandmother, whose husband, who was the Denmark grandfather, had been a lawyer.
That was EPS Denmark.
That's Elisha Pecksmith, Denmark, and he, when I look back on it, he had it made. He was in a town of 18,000 people, and he represented the railroad, and he represented the only bank there, and he represented one of the 2 cotton mills. And an interesting thing about that, he did have it made, and
okay. Is there any reason that you chose Vanderbilt other than that you live near there?
I'm going to back up. His law library was kept in his room, in the room where my grandmother sat by a fire, along with his books on Baptist doctrine. And it was interesting that the doctrine library and the law library were about the same size. But I think letting me see the law books was part of it, and she just indicated she wanted me to be a lawyer, assumed I wanted to be a lawyer. So I think in the end that probably had something to do with it. I did not know any other lawyers. I had somebody in the Robertson County, Tennessee, whose name was Charlie Willett, and he was a cousin, and he was about 50 years older than I was, but he was a statewide good lawyer. But aside from that, we had a few doctors I knew about, but Charlie Willett was the only Tennessee kin that was a lawyer.
Is there any particular reason you chose Vanderbilt?
Because it was there.
Yes.
My father went there, and although he didn't stay very long, he was very loyal to it.
Who were some of the members in your class at law school?
Well, we mentioned Harold Abel. That's the A.
I think you've also mentioned Bill Gamble.
Bill Gamble is one that I didn't get to know other law students particularly well because there were enough of them there that I already knew. But Bill Gamble, I didn't already know, and I don't guess I would have known him till yet, except we were on the law review together. And he was about a third of a jump ahead of me. I mean, it was no real regularity about school back then because of what the war had done to your history. But when I really got to know him was on the law school and on the law review, and he graduated a little bit before I did, and we got to be good friends. He was trying to teach me to play the banjo, among other things. He was a good musician, still is, plays in the symphony and then plays jazz on Saturday night.
Here in Nashville?
Wherever he is. He's in Kingsport.
Oh, okay.
And he recruited me to come up there, and by that time, I was married and we were about to buy a house, and I just didn't want to go up there.
You also mentioned Bill Harbison as someone who was in your class.
Well, he wasn't in my class. He was a year ahead, and he was the head of the law review when I joined, when I went on. And we all know him, and he's outstanding.
I think you told me once that a fellow by the name of Dale Kaufman was the dean of the law school when you were there.
Yes, and he was. He he had been, I think my year was the third year he had been there, and he had a plan for the law school, which was to recruit professors who had reached 65 or 60 or whatever the rule was, and had to retire from the school where they were teaching. And he had Merton Ferson, who was the contracts man, and the criminal lawyer was
Rollin Perkins.
That sounds. Is that right? I believe that's right.
And you also had another professor in torts that you thought a lot of.
Well, he was.
Tell us his name
I
first.
think he may have been there when the dean came, but he was John Wade, and if you knew him awfully well, you wouldn't ever guess that he had been a Marine. You know, he couldn't stand up straight enough to be a Marine, you wouldn't think. But he was, not only was he a Marine, he did a lot of fighting as a Marine. But he was a great scholar and ran the Law Review. So he had a lot more contact with me than I had with the others.
How long were you on the Law Review?
As long as I could stay, which was, it's 2 academic years.
And did you have a position on the Law Review the second year?
I was the managing editor.
What does the managing editor do?
He's the runner between the professor who's watching you and the printing company.
Okay, so then
There may have been some other duty, but I don't remember what it was.
I believe you graduated about 1951.
I did.
Okay, and at that time you were not married, were you?
Not quite.
Where was Miss Allen Wigginton at that time?
She was back. She graduated from Vanderbilt the same day I graduated in absentia in 1949. She had gotten a Fulbright scholarship, and that was, she was in the first wave, and that was named for Senator Fulbright from Arkansas, and it was a great thing. And she went over, and her study was helping some scholar named Tillotson write sort of on a subject nobody's interested in, but she had lots of free time, and she learned how to ski in Switzerland and enjoyed traveling through Scotland and so forth. She had a great year, and I suppose she seasoned out.
Well, after you graduated, did you do like most of us and go around applying for jobs and that sort of thing?
But I haven't gotten married yet.
Well, I'm going to get you married in a minute.
Okay. So what's your question?
But did you go around looking for jobs, employment as a lawyer?
Oh. No, because Bob Warner and Ward DeWitt and I had at some point, maybe while drinking beer at Ireland's, decided that when we got out, we looked at the opportunities for somebody that wasn't kin to a lawyer, like at least a nephew. You weren't going to get a job in Nashville, and we wanted to stay in Nashville, so we decided we'd have our firm when we started. And it turned out better than you would think.
The firm was known as?
It did. DeWitt, Warner, and Bell, and that had nothing to do with age or anything else. It had the most euphonious sound.
Now, that's the first time we've mentioned Ward DeWitt, but that's not the first time he came into your life, is it?
No, he came into my life on the first day at Duncan School when we were.
And then your
and we became best friends at that point, pretty quick. And then it just happened that we both took and passed the V12 exam. We both got sent to Tulane when that was, I don't know what the odds were, 1 in 4 or something. And then when we got out, there were about 3 or 4 possibilities as to what midshipman school you go to. We both went to Northwestern. After that, you could have gone anywhere in the fleet or anywhere else in the naval establishment. We both went to Miami together. And we finally parted company, but he chased me out when I was running the barge in Pearl Harbor. He was coming back from Eniwetok, where he had managed to be, and I think he must have worried in the end whether he might have had some exposure, but I think he didn't. That's where they tested an atomic bomb.
Oh, okay. Did he also go to law school with you?
Yeah, we went through law school together.
And so then you started a firm.
Then we started a firm.
Where was your firm located?
302 Stallman Building.
Did you, you've told me a story about a time between you graduated from law school and actually starting the firm. There was a few weeks in there, I believe.
Yeah, I've forgotten how long it was, but I told you that in connection with the fact that we'd just been schoolboys, and we didn't know any people out in the world. And out of the, I think it was maybe a month, I was employed. I didn't seek the employment. My cousin, who was the main owner of Rock City Construction Company, and they were building the blind school at Donaldson, which is still there, and which was a pretty big project. And they wanted somebody on the job to compute by the hour how much it was costing them on labor for iron workers. And the reason for that was that they had bid the job before the Korean War started up. And the price of steel had gone way up. And so they were interested in cutting those costs as much as they possibly could. And so I was in the field office where the job superintendent was, and his name was Robert Keenan, and he comes into play later too. But I got to know him, and I got to know a bulldozer operator named what?
Graves.
Graves. O.R. Graves. And that, so by the time we got the firm, Robert Keenan was starting to contract for himself, and he hired me some. And
he hired you as a lawyer?
As a lawyer. And the other one was O.R. Graves. I haven't mentioned him. O.R. Graves was a bulldozer operator, and he belonged to a family that was snake bit. They just had more misfortune, and one of the first cases where you got the case, you see, DeWitt, Warner and Bell started with the tabula rasa. We had no clients. And the first tort case we got was when O.R. Graves, 12-year-old child, was running across the highway and got hit by a car.
Well, how did you know how to run a law firm? None of you had ever practiced law. None of you had worked in a law firm or had close family that were lawyers.
I have no answer for that. We may not have run it right.
Was there anybody that you recall going to for advice about what you should do?
No, I don't think so.
Well, how did you do as a firm?
Well, we we were three bachelors, for one thing, and we were all living at home when it started. Very soon, though, I did get married, but I didn't have any babies. And my wife, as I've mentioned, had saved up some money. And we lived in her parents' backyard in a guest house, so it was the same as my economics were as good as theirs, and our parents didn't charge us rent. So that's, truth to tell, is how we did live.
You've told me about a Friday afternoon legal fee that you one of your members.
Well, yes, one of us in the first year or two would go over every afternoon. There's always at least one of us that didn't have anything really keep us busy. You would go over to the General Sessions Court, and for one thing, you were serving the court. He liked to see you because the judge could appoint you to represent indigents. We didn't have public defenders then. Had plenty of prosecutors but no defenders. And so that's, the new lawyers were the public defenders, and so you were discharging that function. But also from time to time, you'd get appointed to somebody, and to make you do a better job, they'd confess they had a little money and they'd pay you. Or as in the case of Sergeant Pillivant, who led us into this particular occasion when Bob Warner went over, and he was employed in the hallway by Sergeant Pillivant and was paid a cash fee of $50. And I think he got good results for Sergeant Pillivant. Then he came back to the office and we were pleased that he brought $50. And the UT Vanderbilt football game was the next day, and we decided to go.
Where was it?
It was in Knoxville. I've forgotten whose car we had, but we took that $50, we drove to Knoxville. We bought tickets. We got there a little late, I think, and the scalpers were cutting their prices, and we got tickets. And we saw the game, and we came back home that same day and had a spaghetti supper, as I recall, on the way. And we got back, and I think we still had $4 or $5 left.
Now, I know that Mr. DeWitt later became a partner in the firm of Trabue, Sturdivant, and DeWitt. Do you still maintain a relationship with him?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're still best friends, but I don't think we've mentioned a handicap that it was a handicap to Ward DeWitt, but not to anybody else. He was known as Judge DeWitt's grandson by the middle-aged and even some of the younger lawyers.
Well, tell us who
his father was John DeWitt, I think was his name. And he practiced law in Nashville and then went to the Court of Appeals and was well respected, I think, both as lawyer and judge. And he was a history scholar also. I think he wrote state history.
Okay, now was that Ward DeWitt's father or grandfather?
That was his grandfather.
Okay.
He had an uncle named Jack DeWitt who was world famous. He was a genius in the things that I'm hopeless in. He hit the moon with radar during World War II, and I never have understood what the great significance was, but he did and was famous for that. And I'm not sure if it was before or after he did that he built the WSM Tower. He designed it and oversaw the building of it. So he was a delightful man to know. So he gave us some pizzazz or whatever you'd call it.
In the community.
They knew who Ward DeWitt was.
Now, what about Bob Warner? What was his later career?
Well, Bob Warner.
Well, first, let me go back. Where did he attend law school?
He was with us the first year at Vanderbilt, and then he was a Sewanee graduate, and so he decided he should be in the Ivy Leagues, and he went to and finished his law schooling at Yale.
And then in later years after your father?
And one thing that he did that's sort of interesting. He was the driver for Estes Kefauver in his I think in his first when he got elected to the Senate.
Okay. How long did you practice with DeWitt, Warner, and Bell?
I can't look at my notes. I think it was 55 when we.
56 maybe?
Okay, 55 or 56, when Ward announced that his wife was going to have twins, and that was, she'd had twins before, except that one of them didn't survive the birthing, but he decided he needed to get more serious about the financial side, and he'd been our representative in the legislature, which may have made it easier for him, but in any event, he got to work with, he joined the, Harbison wasn't yet a member of that firm, but it was Trabue and Sturtevant.
Okay. So that's the end of DeWitt, Warner, and Bell, so that might be a good time for us to take a break. As we went into the break, we were talking about the dissolution of your first firm, DeWitt, Warner, and Bell. What was your next employment?
I joined the offices of Tyne, Sugg, and West.
Who were the principals in that firm?
Tyne was George Henry Tyne, who was called Boots Tyne, and he was a member of the Tyne family that invested money in the National Life Insurance Company and have that beautiful house with the palace, small gates on the Hillsborough Road going south. It's on your right. And it may still be owned by Tynes, I don't know, but they were, and Boots Tyne was had an office in the National Life, and he was on their council staff, but he had other interests, and he somehow was a friend to Bill Sugg, who's the next name in the firm name, who was an excellent lawyer from Fayetteville, Tennessee, where his family owned a bank. And but he liked Nashville, and he liked to practice law up here, and he had a diversified practice. And then West was Wilson West, who was the brother of Ben West, who was then mayor.
Mayor of Nashville.
Mayor of Nashville, and had just become, he'd just been mayor for a short time. And why those three men happened to get together, I really don't know. I wasn't in on that. But they had room for me, and actually I think I was approached by Wilson West, asked if I was interested in coming with him, he'd like to talk to me. So I did, and we did.
What kind of law did you practice while you were with that firm?
Well, they had a general practice. I think it was Bill Sugg who had a regular retainer from the part of the Commerce Union Bank that was doing automobile and mobile home financing back when bankers didn't think that was appropriate. I think they just thought they didn't want a mortgage on something that could be hooked up and rolled to another state. But so that was a fair amount of business that he got from that bank, and then he had a good practice. Bill Sugg was a contemporary of John Hooker Sr., and they were close friends and had some of the habits that they probably shouldn't have had. But they were both really good lawyers without any great noise about it. But
my question was, what did you do during that time?
I helped out. That's true, I helped out. I also got a sinecure out of it in that I got employed. I'm not sure the whole firm was there, but at some time when I was practicing with Wilson West in some combination, they undertook the Nashville Housing Authority rebuilt the condemned properties to clear out slums in East Nashville, and before that, I think that was before I was signed on, they had beautified Capitol Hill, which was a houses of ill repute before they beautified it, known behind the Capitol. And so I did a fair amount of condemnation work, which didn't involve much trial. It mainly involved juries of view, and I did the paperwork and showed the real estate appraisers where the properties were and so forth. But I made a study. I kept thinking somebody's going to challenge the right to condemn on the basis that it never has made sense to me under the Constitution that you can do what they had already done, and I don't think they got sued about it, although I've been told they did. But the municipal auditorium replaced a motion picture theater. It seems to me to take for public use a picture show and turn it into a hockey arena is not due process towards the movie.
That's a subject matter that's recently in the news.
Yeah.
I know you practiced law with Wilson West for several years, and I think you became good friends.
Yes.
Describe Wilson West for us.
Wilson West looked like what he had been. He looked like a guard on a football team at the college level. And his looks, and so he looked sort of like a roughneck. He was neat and clean and all of that, but he just looked like he might be dangerous if you rubbed him the wrong way. But he actually was a good legal scholar, and he didn't particularly like to go to court, but when he went, he did well. So he was a good mentor, and he'd been practicing for quite a while, though he was still a young man. So he was. The thing with him was, he did some lobbying, which I had nothing to do with, but he had just individual clients, and they had personal injury cases, they had contracts, they had the whole spread of law practice, and I just we'd work together on things, and when the time to we didn't have retainers, but when a fee would be earned and paid in, we'd have what he called cutting the pumpkin session, in which he always would make a suggestion about how we divide this, and it was always, I thought, plenty for me. And I think I've told you that when the reason that I left that firm after Ben West had come out of the mayor's office and was there for a while, he was a charismatic man and had been a terrific lawyer. But he was sort of a Rip Van Winkle. He'd been out of it for, what, I think 8 or 12 years. And things had happened, like the Uniform Commercial Code, that he was unaware of. And so I was very helpful to him because I could tell him, you can't assume the law hadn't changed.
Well, I believe you.
And I made more money for the time he was there than I had made before, by a substantial amount. But instead of the way it worked with Wilson West, I'd have to sort of debate him about what my share of the fee should be, and I just didn't like that. It just wasn't pleasant. I was coming out fine, but I had also gotten interested in things in Williamson County where I had been living for a while.
Okay. And that was about 1963, I believe, that you left. At that time, it had become West and West instead of Tyne, Suggs and West.
Yeah.
Okay. And you came to Williamson County. Where did you go in Williamson County?
I rented space, and I rented the downstairs of a beautiful old Victorian house. And it's the only law office I had that one that had a bathtub in the water closet, but a bathtub on legs. And that was my first office there.
So you became a sole practitioner.
And I was a sole practitioner.
Before we leave Nashville, let's go back and pick up a couple of other activities that you were involved in Nashville. First was the legal aid committee of the Nashville Bar Association. What part did you play in that?
Well, I was chairman of the committee, and it was a functioning thing when I was appointed chairman. I think I came on as chairman. I don't remember having a chairman. And it was set up, at that time, it was before the courthouse had grown to where it didn't have any extra space, and it had a bar library in the courthouse, and next to it was an assembly room with a bunch of tables and chairs, very comfortable. And that's where we held it, and the number for the legal aid office was in the phone book, and when you dialed it, you got the secretary of the library, the librarian. And she'd tell them when and where to come, and it was once a week, and 1 o'clock in the afternoon until you finished. And people would come in, and you would, if they needed if they had a legal question that you could answer, you'd answer it. If they needed a lawyer to do something, you'd get on the phone and get a lawyer to respond when this person comes. And we had good lawyers. We had like Frank Gorell and Macklin Davis and so forth.
As the chairman of the committee, are you the one that met with them on Wednesday afternoon or whatever time was
Well, I think it wasn't decreed that way, but that's the way it wound up. I usually was the one that spent the afternoon. And that's where I got the feeling that what I'd get these stories, and unless it was a divorce case, it was that they needed a lawyer. but if it was a landlord-tenant problem or almost anything you can think of, the statutory law was such that a lawyer wasn't going to do them any good. They needed somebody in the legislature to lobby. And I've been somewhat pleased in recent years. Two things happened. There was the public defender concept came in, so you had lawyers in criminal cases that were not somebody that the judge just went out in the hall and tagged him. And
you were talking about lobbyists?
Yeah. What I came to think was that what they needed was a lobbyist.
Well, of course, then we have the federal legal aid people too now, right?
Well, we don't anymore. We had it for a while. But that went out with when Reagan came in. Okay. I believe I'm right about that.
Well, how did you become aware of the need for legal aid to start with? Or do you recall that?
Well, it's obvious poor people have legal problems, and my problem was that what they needed was the statutory laws was always against them, and so I've been very gratified that we do have people, and I send a lot more money to those entities that are either lobbying or representing poor folks than I do to Vanderbilt Law School, for example.
The other committee you served on was the one involving lawyer discipline.
Yes, and I was I got pretty well upset about that because there are two that I remember where I thought they should have just been disbarred out of hand, and but I was outvoted.
But you were on the committee, though. Of course, at that time there was no
people like the late.
Let's not name anyone.
All right.
At that time, there was no board of professional responsibility.
No.
And this was just something that the Nashville Bar Association did on their own.
It was called the grievance committee.
And if they had voted to disbar someone, what would they have done?
While I was on that committee, I don't think they ever voted to disbar anybody.
If they wanted to, though, what would they have had to do?
They'd have had to get arranged for a lawyer to file a disbarment suit.
Okay.
And I think they had standing to file a suit.
Okay. Anyway, we've talked about your moving to Williamson County, and you practiced there in private practice for about 10 years, I believe, from 64 to 74.
True.
At one time, you held an office that took up a lot of your time. What was that?
Well, I was county attorney for, if that's what you have reference to. And that was, there was a statute that created the office of county attorney, and I don't know what the history of that was, because the county, under the general county law, everywhere the county executive has implied authority to get legal counsel when the county needs it. And they had always had something they called a county attorney, and at some time before I came along, there was a private act in the legislature enacted that created the office of county attorney, and he was to be selected, I think, by the county judge, and was to be paid a salary of an amount of money that wasn't enough if I wanted to be county attorney, because I sort of knew what was involved. But they had worked it out so that between the judge that wanted me for county attorney when he came into office. The custom had been that he submitted that choice to the county court, and they would approve it, and he would be employed. But I said, I don't think I want to sign on to do what I think this involves for $3,000 a year, whatever it was. I said it was. Just leave pay out of it, and they repealed the statute. I said, y'all have the right to hire me and pay me what I'm worth. So I didn't think there'd be any contest. It turned out there was. A fellow named Frank Ingraham found out that they were going to elect a county attorney. He showed up, and they had a secret ballot. And I prevailed, and I thought I had them counted to begin with, but you never know. So that was the county attorney system. Also, and sort of, it followed as the night, the day that the county attorney would file the annual tax lawsuits to keep the statute of limitation from running for property taxes. And in Williamson County, my advice to him was never scold anybody about not paying taxes, because everything in this county is going to be sold in the next 20 years. And the interest and penalty and attorney's fees are all building up, and it's going to be collected, and you're not going to be taking property from widows and orphans. And that was pretty well followed, still is.
But the county attorney, when the taxes were paid, the county attorney...
He got his statutory fee. Okay. So that my pay was more than it appeared.
Okay. In any event, somewhere around 1974, you decided to run for circuit judge.
Yes.
Why would you do that? Or why did you do that?
I had sort of gotten myself out of debt, and I thought I'd always thought I'd like to be a judge eventually, and so it seemed like a good time to be when and the judge's pay was not. It was in the same range with what I was earning as a lawyer, because I just had case by case. I represented people. I never represented a bank except partially and occasionally and so forth.
Okay, at that time, the circuit judgeship you ran for was the 17th Judicial Circuit, I believe.
Yes.
And what jurisdiction did it have?
Well, it would take a long time to give you the history of how it came to be, but when I came aboard, there was one judge. And that judge had circuit jurisdiction, which included criminal, in Williamson, Hickman, Lewis, and Perry counties, except the chancery jurisdiction he didn't have in Hickman County. That was done by the fellow from Dixon County.
And I believe that was Alex Darnell.
That was Alex Darnell at the time. So it's complex, it was sort of historical, and I don't know what the historical circumstances were, but it was an odd district.
At the time you run, had any judge, to your knowledge, ever run as a part of on a party ticket in Williamson or that circuit?
No.
And of course, you didn't either.
No.
Did you have an opponent?
I did, and he didn't either.
Who was your opponent?
His name was Abe Hatcher, and Abe Hatcher, if I had realized how many kinfolks he had, not only in Williamson County, but the others. He was the son of a beloved doctor who, delivered babies in the kitchen. So historically, the Hatcher family a beloved family, but I was new, and I didn't take him very seriously. I mean, everybody says he's an educated fool, and he had, I think he got it all. He got it all at UT. No offense intended.
Be careful.
He just kept going to school. He went through and got a graduate degree in agriculture, and he got a law degree from UT Law School. And then he got a job for one of the big chemical companies up in Pittsburgh or somewhere, and spent until his retirement time.
Well,
not in the state, and therefore he didn't meet the residence requirement for.
Well, I was going to explain what happened in the election, and you've touched on some of it, and I'm not going to force you to explain it, but he did have a lot of family in the county, and I think no one really was aware of that because he wasn't well known in the Franklin area. The bar, I think, all thought you would easily win that election, and they didn't get out and do a lot of work. And then it turns out that a lot of people in Mr. Hatcher's family were members of the Church of Christ. And of course, the other counties in our district have a lot of Church of Christ, and they prevailed on them to support him too. And the result of that was that you didn't get the most votes at the end of the election.
That's right.
So what happened then?
Well, I filed what was basically a declaratory judgment suit claiming that he didn't meet the constitutional statutory requirements, which was whatever number of years.
5 years, I believe.
5 years. And I think he had been back about a year and a half and trying to have a law practice, which he didn't have much of. But he was a decent person.
And I think at that point you got some assistance from your friend Wilson West, who you had practiced law with.
Yeah, he volunteered. He and Ward DeWitt, my former partner, were my lawyers in that. And it really was a slam dunk. All you had to do was get it in the Supreme Court and read the constitutional requirement and what the proof. We had to put the proof on.
But I recall that Wilson, though, called some lawyers he knew up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Dave Alexander in Franklin, I think, was thinking about sending you up to Chicago or whatever town it was.
Philadelphia,
But
Pennsylvania.
Wilson had already gotten a lawyer up there and found out there was no problem getting proof that he'd been a bona fide voting resident of those counties.
What court was that lawsuit heard in? Or who was the judge that was appointed to hear it?
Why don't you ask me a leading question about that?
Okay, when did Chancellor Ingram from over in East Tennessee? And that my memory.
I think it was. I think it was.
At any event, what was the outcome of that lawsuit?
Chancellor Inman was everywhere doing those cases. Any kind of case you had for him. I don't know where he got the energy, but he loved it.
What was the outcome of the lawsuit?
I won.
Okay, so Mr. Hatcher was declared not qualified to serve.
Right.
And then how did you become?
Well, you see, when I filed the lawsuit and created the issue of the apparent winner before proof, court had to go on, and there had to be a judge, and I was appointed.
Well, not that time. You're jumping ahead. I think that time Jim Peterson was appointed to be the interim judge.
Until the governor could appoint somebody.
Okay.
And so he was it for a month, I think. And we got it to court, and I was declared. I mean, the lawsuit was over once we got there, and so my time was not shortened, and I got paid for it because it was established I was the judge, even though I couldn't take
But
office.
you officially were appointed by Governor Winfield Dunn, were you not, to the judgeship?
Yep.
Okay. And that took place in January of 1975. Is that when you were sworn in?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the first days that you were a judge?
No. Do you?
Were you ever concerned about your popularity among the people, or dealing with the Hatchers and all their relatives as a judge?
The Hatchers, including Abe Hatcher, were very pleasant people. Mac Hatcher, who has a freeway named after him, and I think he voted for me on the slab, but he said when I was running, to my family, I can't get out and work for you. But what question was I answering?
Were you concerned about dealing with the Hatchers as a judge?
Well, no, because the Hatchers were just very decent, good people.
At that time, I know now they have a judicial academy for new judges in Tennessee. Did they have anything like that when you were a judge, became a judge?
Yeah, I didn't go to it.
So you just climbed on the bench and started judging, huh?
I talked to some people who'd been there, and I thought they went. Apparently, you got out there to be taught bad habits.
Okay, so anyway, you became a judge, and when's the next time you had to run?
Well, 8 years from then.
So that would have been 82.
Yeah.
And I believe Mr. Hatcher ran against you again in 82.
He ran again.
And what was the outcome of that election?
Well, he didn't get very many. It wasn't close. I won that one.
I believe that time the lawyers rallied to your assistance.
I got a lot of help.
Okay. And you served your second term, which would have ended in 1990, and came up for re-election. Did you run again?
I did.
Did you have opposition that time?
Yes, I did.
And who was your opposition?
Well, her name was Jane Forbes, and by this time, a lot of wealthy people who were Republicans had moved into the Brentwood area, and the Republican Party had gotten big. And they put an ad in the paper which the chairman of the party said they didn't really intend it that way, but it was an invitation for anybody who wanted to get into any primary office in the primary election for any county office or whatever was going to be on the election, could apply to the Republican Party chairman and get qualified as a Republican. And Jane did that, and I'll tell you what, those Republican women made Jane prettier than I thought she could ever be made to look. But because she was a pretty good-looking woman, but she needed a little enhancement. But we ran our race, and it was very, very close. I know that I went home and went to bed before all the votes were in and went to sleep and woke up, and we had won, but we knew it was going to be close. And Jane Ms. Forbes filed a contest not in all of the counties, but in Hickman County. Okay. And that one was over almost before it started.
But there was an interim judge named during that contest too.
Who was it? Refresh my memory.
But didn't Ned Ray McWhorter appoint you as the interim judge while that lawsuit?
Yes, he did.
So you've now been appointed
I've been appointed by 2 governors and elected 3 times.
and with 2 governors in separate parties, not only 2 governors.
And that won't happen again for a long time.
I believe when you started, you served with Judge Terry Larkin.
Yes.
And he did mainly the criminal cases, and as I recall,
Yeah, when they added that judge, they made the original, my court, I was Division 1, he was Division 2, and we ran for separate offices. And the Division 2 had the responsibility for handling the grand jury and for trying the criminal docket, and to perform such additional services as the presiding judge of Division 1 shall put upon him. Well, he had plenty to do with his criminal docket, so and I wasn't about to start assigning him additional work. But he had problems that were partly his and partly because of a clash of personalities between him and the district attorney. And at some point, the district attorney came to me and said, "You're the presiding judge. I want you to remove Judge Larkin from the criminal docket, and you take over the criminal docket." And I said, "I'm not going to do that, but I'll do this." I think Judge Larkin he thinks chancery is great stuff, and I'll make a deal with him, which I'm sure he will agree to, which he did, that I would take over the Williamson County criminal docket until such time as that docket got reasonably well caught up with, because it had a bad backlog. And you can do the criminal and the other, and the chancery work everywhere. So that worked pretty well.
And then I believe in 1982, Judge Larkin was defeated by the district attorney, who was Elmer Davies, who became Judge Elmer Davies. And then, so you served with him for a number of years.
Yes.
And then in 1986, they added a 3rd division, which I was lucky enough to fill. And the person I'm trying to get to is that Judge Davies resigned in 1989, and Connie Clark was named. I know she's somebody that you had admired for a long time.
I admired her from afar and from close up.
But what qualities did she have that you thought she would? What qualities did she have that you had observed that you thought would make her a good judge?
Well, she was an excellent lawyer, and she was a scholar, and she was a worker, and you can't beat that.
And I know you've told me you don't remember this, but you predicted that she would serve on the Tennessee Supreme Court before she ever took the trial bench.
I'm glad I did.
Of course, that's come to pass. And then Judge Clark and you and I served together till your retirement in 1998, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. While you were on the bench, what kind of cases did you enjoy hearing more than others? Or were there some kinds of cases?
I don't know. Have I mentioned to you that I might have enjoyed some kind of cases more than others?
No, that's something we hadn't talked about.
Okay.
Let's move to another subject. We served in a district that was had a suburban county, Williamson on one end, and the rural counties of Perry and Hickman and Lewis on the other. Were there differences in the way courts are handled in all of those counties?
I would say about as much as between the federal courts and the state courts. Yeah, there was.
Can you describe some of those?
We had the same rules of procedure, but things were more laid back, you might say, in the smaller populated counties.
Okay. You served as a judge then for over 23 years, I believe, or about 23 years.
I thought it was 24, but I was settled for 23.
Well, it was over 23, maybe near 24. What do you recall what your most rewarding experiences that you had during that time? Or any cases that you think were significant?
I had, in preparing for this interview, I sort of went back thinking when we had time towards the end that I could discuss one or two cases that I enjoyed. One was in Williamson County, and it was much publicity about it, and the facts basically were that these people who lived in a nice house in Brentwood, and the husband had made a lot of money at a highly specialized technical job he had. His mother lived in a separate apartment in the house, and they had two children, but they only had one, I think, at the time of the events in the case. But the wife's mother-in-law turned up missing, but she wasn't missed by her son or her grandson who lived in the same house with her. And it turned out that the wife had been driving around with her mother-in-law in the trunk of her car and buying lots of ice to keep her fresh. And I think it was 3 or 4 weeks after she turned up missing, and I'm not even sure that a murder had been, or any disappearance had been reported to anybody. But she had a bad gambling habit, and so she got in the car with the mother-in-law in the trunk and got sleepy going up to the casinos across the Ohio River and parked to take a little nap, and a trooper came by and saw dripping out of the back, whatever, his attention was attracted, and she acted fishy or something, and he went in the trunk and found the mother-in-law. So Lee Hoffman, who was a fairly young lawyer at that time, who came here from wherever he came from to break in the music business, but he had a law degree and was really made a good lawyer. And he was employed in that case, and he was representing both the husband and the wife. And another judge had started with it, and when I got into it and saw that, it turned out the other lawyer had done the same thing. I hauled Lee Hoffman in and said, how can you represent these two people? And both of them charged with the same murder. And he said, trust me, Judge, I have a reason. And he didn't say I'm willing to be disbarred if it turns out I'm wrong. But so the case went to trial and had a locked up jury, and trial lasted quite a while and was well tried on both sides. And that's when I learned about the just total dysfunction in this family. And the jury went out to deliberate. They stayed out for quite a long time. End of the night, and it was turned out we had a blizzard, and it was a great problem, but they were going to decide it because they wanted to go home. They'd been locked up for 3 or 4 nights. And they came in and they found the wife guilty and the husband not guilty. And the husband and wife stood up and embraced each other. And then I knew. It came out the way they wanted it to, and she went into treatment and probably Central State Hospital, but that was the way they both wanted it. You want another famous case?
Well, let's talk about, I want to talk about being judge, and these are things that we haven't talked about, but you just listen to my question. When you were a lawyer, what did you think made a good judge?
Except for Judge Miller, who was a federal judge and was an excellent judge, I like for him to open court on schedule. And I like for him to not keep things under advisement any longer than absolutely necessary. Those were the 2 main things.
Did you try to follow that when you were judge?
Yeah.
Did you add any other qualifications to be what was a good judge after you became a judge?
No, you might have some recommendations I might have given myself.
You also had some difficulty with the election process. Do you think electing judges is a good thing?
I think it's better than the alternative. It's the tradition.
Okay. You can't think of, there is no better way, is that?
I'd try to be a better candidate if I had my life to live over again. I haven't given that a whole lot of thought, and I think maybe that we are now a real 2-party state, that it might be a good idea to have appointed judges.
What about the jury system? How do you feel it works?
I think it works. Well, I think it works because of the results I've seen. I think it's a good citizenship experience for the people who participate. And I think some people, particularly businessmen, they need to go and think seriously about something besides their business. I think it's good for the businessmen's health when they get in, because they get in.
I wanted, before it's time for us to stop this, I want to talk a little bit about actually what you've been doing since you retired, and it's not a lot different, I don't think, than what you did before you retired, but you have some avocations that I think are interesting. One is raising peacocks.
Well, we were given peacocks many years ago by my wife's uncle as a reward for us giving space to live in and so forth in our house when she had gotten to a difficult age and needed to live in somebody else's house for a while. And he added on a bathroom for us, and he gave us peacocks.
And so how many do you have now?
I didn't count them this morning, but they are starting to mate again, and I think we've got about 3 or 4 of each hens and cocks.
Okay. Another thing that you do that you actually got me involved in was raising tomatoes.
Yes.
Is there a particular variety of tomato that you raise?
Yes, it's the Bowman Special, and Joe Bowman was a genius at growing. He was he had a, when I first knew him, I knew him well because he was on the Quarterly County Court when I was the county attorney. And then he got to be the building commissioner, I think. But he had had about a 600-acre farm, and that was what he had done until he sold it because he said he had to sell it because his children needed to go to college, which wasn't true. But then he had about a 10-acre vegetable garden, and he had a gift for growing everything. And he gave me some tomatoes, and they were the best tomatoes I ever had. And so I asked him from time to time. I know they're mixed, and you've told me that between. But what are they a mix between? And he always said, well, it's a cross between the mortgage lifter and a tomato a man gave me from down in Murray County. Or it might be some other county, but it was always a mortgage lifter was one of them. And we were talking about Smart. The Smart reunion always has mortgage lifter tomatoes. They grow well in that county.
But anyway, you've grown Bowman Specials, and you have me growing Bowman Specials, and about how many other people in Williamson County would you say?
I hope there's 8 or 10.
And of course, the tomatoes not only taste good, but they grow larger than the average tomato, do they not? Mm-hmm. The other thing that you've done that I admire about you is it concerns the farm where you live. How large is that now?
It's 90 acres.
Okay, and what have you done to preserve that farm?
I put I put all but 18 acres of it, which is the part where I live and where my farm buildings are, in the land trust, which I hope we all know about.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, it's something that I don't. I think it's been forgotten, but Governor Bredesen, it was his concept. He started it. And the concept was that we don't want everything in subdivisions. And this you get a tax break, which runs out. Mine's running out right this minute. But for about 7 years, you get a substantial reduction of your net taxable income. So, and you're still free to use it. I went down to one at Nunnally, Tennessee. It was given by the Nunnally family, and it was 1,000 acres on the Piney River. So
you could use it, but you just can't subdivide it?
Yeah, it's been yeah. They also want you to give some money to keep it up, and I haven't started doing that yet, but they ain't started keeping.
Do you farm your land?
Yeah, I'm still permitted to do that, and I still have an arrangement, though the cows are temporarily not there, with a fellow who runs cows on my place. Do
you have other people who help you around the farm or around your house?
Yeah, but they're getting old and decrepit.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask you a couple of last questions. The first question is there anything else that you would like to tell us that I haven't asked you about?
I think you've about exhausted the possibilities.
Okay. And the second one is either how would you like to be remembered, or what is what accomplishment that you've had in your life has given you the most satisfaction?
I'll just have to say I don't know. I will say that I've enjoyed life. and I've done the best I could.
Well, I'll say that as someone who's practiced before you and served with you, that you are one of the finest trial judges that I've ever been around. And that reputation is shared by many other lawyers, the litigants, and the courthouse personnel. And I want to thank you for this interview and again for agreeing to be interviewed.